Welcome everyone to Day 3, Session 2 of our Research and Innovation Week. On behalf of Prof. France, our Director, our DVC of Research and Innovation, and all the organizers of the event, we're delighted to welcome you to today's session. Today's afternoon session will be presentations from 4 members from the Faculty of Education. Our first speaker is Dr. Benita Nel. So just before that, if you have any questions, please make use of the Q&A section. We'll be taking Q&A after each presenter, so please do keep that in mind and write questions as you go along. Obviously, this will be time dependent as we are wanting to keep to our time. Right, so our first speaker today is Dr. Benita Nel from the Faculty of Education. And Dr. Nel is a senior lecturer in the School of Science and Mathematics in the Faculty of Education. Her research interest is mathematics, teachers' professional development, and her latest research project is on teacher reflection through video-stimulated recall. She has been involved in teacher development in various institutions of higher learning as well as NGOs. Dr. Nel, over to you.
Thank you very much. My topic today is noticing through self-reflection by mathematics teachers using video-stimulated recall. The range of what we think and do is limited by what we fail to notice. And because we fail to notice that we fail to notice, there is a little we can do to change until we notice how failing to notice shapes our thoughts and deeds. That is by Goldman. And Schoenfeld also emphasized the fact that noticing matters. Teachers can learn from their practice through noticing. However, noticing is a superficial way, in a superficial way, might not contribute to improved practice. SAIS declared early on already that inadequate provisioning of professional development programs for teachers, and that is offered mainly taking place in the form of workshops. So the professional development is then detached from the classroom and are mostly happening off-site. A gap exists between what happens in professional development sessions and how it is implemented in the classroom. Video-stimulated recall is a professional development tool that can be used as an in-house initiative based on self-reflection. Reflecting on a video-recorded lesson can be helpful to reflect on a lesson in real time, where you sequentially see how the lesson unfolds. And therefore, the research question is, what did the mathematics teachers notice and act upon when video-stimulated recall was incorporated as a professional development initiative? So, as my introduction, as my methodology, this is a qualitative study where interviews and field notes were used as data collection instruments. One experienced teacher was involved in the study. The teacher had more than 10 years of experience in teaching mathematics at a rural school, semi-rural, but the school is fairly well resourced. 2 lessons of a grade 10 class was recorded and reflected upon. The study took place during the COVID pandemic, where the timetabling was done on a rotational basis. Therefore, there were 20 learners in the classroom roughly, but actually the actual class size is roughly 40. Now, the question is, what is video stimulated recall? Video stimulated recall is where me as the researcher in this case, I video recorded the lesson. I was standing at the back of the class with the camera. I tried not to interrupt the lesson or be of any disturbance to the class. And the teacher just went on with business as per usual. And then after some time, I come back to the school, and then me and the teacher will watch the video together. In this case, the lessons were 30 minutes long, so we watched the entire video, entire lesson, and thereafter, the teacher will reflect on what he or she saw in the lesson. And then the researcher will also use prompts if needed to facilitate the reflection even more. But the essence is the teacher is reflecting on his own lesson that's taking place in his a familiar context, namely his classroom. So the results and the discussion. When the teacher was done observing his first lesson through the video, from the start, the teacher was surprised to notice certain aspects of his conduct or the classroom practice when you watch the video. He started his lesson before the learner settled down, and that is what he realized while after he watched the video. He was not even aware that he started the lesson before the learner settled down. His words were like, but how can I start? These learners are not yet settled down. And later on, even 10 minutes later, he will say, but there's still learners not settled down. But that was only possible for him to see because of the video that was being used. Another excerpt, he said, I usually only ask the weak learners questions to see if they are with me and understand. But then you forget about the learners that do well, but maybe not be 100% with you. And I left them, and then I saw later on, but they are not really on board. So teacher one also realized after he saw that the stronger learners shouted out incorrect questions that they were not 100% on board. So he's understanding that the stronger learners are with him in understanding the work, and when they shouted out answers, he assumed that the answers were correct. But watching the video, he realized, but they shouted out the incorrect answers, and this made him very uncomfortable, but also aware. Some more results. He said, I see now only on the video here that I actually spoke a lot. Lessons were too teacher-centered. So this teacher inherently is actually a shy person, but in his class, he spoke a lot. So he was not even aware of that, but he noticed that through the video. He noticed that he was leading the learners too much to answers. And the learners, they did too little in the classroom. He didn't give them sufficient time to try out tasks on their own. While they were still busy, he will start with the answers. Of course, in the COVID time was against teachers, but he didn't realize that as well. So the learners did too little in the classroom. The learners need to struggle more with the sums in the class in order to enhance their conceptual understanding. And that is what this teacher noticed. He realized that he covered too much content in one lesson. In one of the lessons, he was busy with a straight line graph. So he was busy with the formula of a straight line graph. What is the effect of the gradient when it comes to the graph? What is the effect of the y-intercept? But in the same lesson, he also included parallel lines and perpendicular lines. That is a lot. Parallel and perpendicular lines, a section that needs a lot of time for grade 10 learners, but he covered all of that in one lesson. And that he realized when he looked back on his lesson. Look, he said, I have actually seen a lot by just looking at the video now. How I should approach certain exercises, what can work better in the class. I maybe talk too much. This made me open my eyes a bit. So this is what the teacher realized. But the question is, so what is he doing about it? And now I'm looking at, so what the teacher acted upon. He made sure the learners are settled down before he started the lesson. I spoke about that earlier. The teacher's presence in the class was highlighted. He realized that he needs to be closer to the learners, see what they're doing, listen to what they're answering, be cognizant whether learners are following what he's trying to conduct, and also give learners time to really delve into questions. So his presence, and it was also evident that he moved around in the classroom more, just to make his presence felt more. He allowed the learners to struggle more on their own. There were times when he was quiet, compared to the first lesson. He allowed the learners to struggle, and he will walk around and check on what they were doing. So the class became more learner-centered because he talked less and he allowed the learners to do more, and also he monitored them more. He was more attentive to the answers learners gave him, so his listening sharpened. Just by observing the previous lesson, his listening was sharpened. So noticing is a process. We cannot expect everything to be noticed at once. It's a process, and reflection should be part of a teacher's continuous development. This was only the start to deeper self-reflection, because a teacher is now pleasantly surprised by what he noticed. And it is actually a catalyst for him to go deeper into his self-reflection. It's not that he can defute what happened because the evidence were there in the video, not that he wanted to do that. And quite a number of aspects were picked up by the teacher which he acted upon. However, there were aspects that the teacher still needed to work on, such as him doing less and the learner more. Also, the selection of examples in order to scaffold concepts, that is a crucial element in the lesson, and being more connected with the learners. It's a process, and we need to allow time for that. In conclusion, the teacher noticed a number of aspects of his lesson classroom conduct that he was not previously aware of, and he acted on some in a short space of time. Remember, I'm just reporting on 2 lessons. The 2 lessons were too little, however, to investigate the extent of noticing and what the teacher acted upon thereafter. I cannot report on what happened thereafter in this presentation, but there's too little that accounts for more investigation. Other noticed aspects need more time for refinement. In addition, there are aspects in his practice that was not noticed by him. And as I said, noticing is a process. The use of video simulated recall has significant potential for teachers, but also as an in-house professional development initiative for subject teams. We can have that, we have one of the subject team members doing the recording and also assisting with the reflection by a teacher, and in that way we can even pair up novice and experienced teachers, and they can learn from each other, and in so doing we can have better mentoring happen, where we use video simulated recall also as a not just as a reflective tool, but also as a mentoring tool. Video simulators do allow for more customized professional development, which address context-specific aspects, which can be addressed in a real time, in a safe environment, because the teacher's own classroom is a much safer environment than being in a workshop where the professional development is not customized and where it's not context-specific. Teachers in rural areas has got a different context compared to teachers in the bigger city. Teachers who work with disadvantaged communities have got other challenges than teachers who work in more affluent schools. And therefore, I strongly propose that video simulated recall must be considered as a professional development initiative in different schools. And to conclude some of my references, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nel. That very interesting presentation, I think useful for us to all be more aware of our own noticing in ourselves. I think your findings demonstrate that so well, how the benefit of being self-aware of our own practices. And I'm thinking, well, this was in the context of teacher education. I think us as academics and students, we can also use this for our own benefit in terms of being more aware of our own practice in higher education contexts as well. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
And if there are any questions, please will you post them in the Q&A section. While we're just waiting to see if there are any questions, we'd like to extend a welcome to Prof. Marman, who's the Deputy Dean of Research in the Faculty of Education. Welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Jianni. Appreciate it.
I don't see any questions at this stage for Dr. Nel.
Can I pose a question, Jianni?
By all means, yes. Go ahead, Prof. Marman.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Nel, for your presentation. Very interesting. And I must congratulate you on the way that you have delved on what's happening in mathematics classrooms in South Africa. I think that's crucial that we go there and that we experience that coal phase of the teaching and learning of our youngsters. So that's number one. Congratulations with that. Secondly, I want to ask you, the QMS, it was previously known as the IQMS, right? The measuring tool of the professional development of teachers, right? So they've shortened it to the QMS. So I was wondering, do you perhaps know how these aspects that have come out in your research, like self-awareness, like how long I speak in a classroom, being conscious of my questioning, and all those pedagogical and didactical aspects, how does it relate with that QMS tool that's being used nationwide to sort of assess the professional development of teachers?
Thank you very much for the question, Professor Marman. It was very interesting. This study is, what I presented is a section of a broader study where 4 master students are involved in, but IQMS came out very strongly in some of the interviews where the teachers made it very clear and that they feel that they can identify their own aspects that still needs development. So they don't need somebody to come into their classroom and show them how where there are aspects that still needs development. They can identify that themselves, and they are even willing to have the line managers, the subject heads, or the HODs come into the classroom in this way and sit in the video where they can sort of assess them according to the IQMS standards. And this way is also less threatening to them because they feel more in control. It's not like the inspector is watching them. So they themselves related this way of reflecting with the IQMS and said that the department must consider using this way of incorporating a video simulator recall in the IQMS in order to do the same things, identify weaknesses or challenges and or areas of development, and then how they act upon it. And they can also write journals in which they explain to the department or the IQMS officials how they have developed. So thank you for that question. I hope I answered you.
Great, thank you so much. I think that highlights again the importance of overlapping sources of evidence in all we do, including in evaluation. Thank you so much, Dr. Nel.
Thank you.
I don't see any questions in the Q&A, so I think we'll move on to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Charles Raymond Smith. Just waiting for the bio to be shared. We seem to have an error on that side. So Dr. Smith joined the SSME via the Let Him Clearly project as a doctoral student under Prof. Julie in 2014. Subsequent to his studies, he was appointed to the project as a research assistant and was promoted in 2020 as senior researcher. His interest is in teacher development and more specifically in teacher professional learning, where his focus is on the development of teaching toolkits for teachers. His research outputs include journal publications, book chapters, and conference papers on a variety of topics related to teacher professional learning. This includes topics such as professional learning communities, professional learning in third spaces, professional learning through appropriation of CPD production, activating prior knowledge, semiotics in geometry teaching and learning in geometry, and implementing digital technologies in the mathematics classroom. His hobbies include photography and caravanning. Dr. Smith, over to you. Dr. Smith, can you please share your screen and turn on your video and audio? Great, thank you. You may begin.
Are we there yet? Good afternoon, colleagues. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. The topic of my research can be stated as towards understanding integrating digital technologies in the mathematics classroom. So this research investigated the knowledge and skills required of teachers to integrate digital technologies in a mathematics classroom. By way of introduction, let me start off by saying it's common knowledge that the GeoGebra software package is very popular amongst high school teachers. As such, in our Let Him Clearly project, we encourage teachers to experiment with it and to come and give feedback and share their experiences with colleagues, because that turns out, based on research, to be in a very effective CPD strategy. So one teacher's design of classroom activities, which he prepared by using GeoGebra software, was investigated, and the lens we put over the activity was the TPEC lens, technological pedagogical content knowledge, and instrumentation theory, and I'll explain as we go along. So the episode, therefore, that we report on occurred in the context of a teacher sharing with colleagues in a CPD project. The research question that guided us was, how can the teacher's knowledge when preparing GeoGebra activities to implement in classrooms be conceptualized? The research design that we used to attempt in answering the question was qualitative, and we used a deductive analytic approach in the data analysis The theoretical underpinnings that we operated from includes two frameworks. One, instrumental orchestration, that comes from the French didactical tradition, but we consulted Drivers et al. 2020. And the other lens that we put over the data was that one of TPAC, as described by Mishra and Kula, 2006. And the TPAC lens is something that is an offshoot from Schulman's 8 knowledge components of teachers. So what is TPAC? TPAC sits at the intersection of 3 of Schulman's knowledge components. In fact, 2 of them, pedagogical knowledge and content knowledge, those 2 circles, plus what Mishra and Kula introduced, technical knowledge. And so there is where TPAC is sitting. And looking at all the intersections of these 3 circles gives us about 6 or 7, if we leave out the contextual knowledge, 6 knowledge components that can describe the knowledge required by teachers in implementing ICTs or digital technologies in the classroom. The other lens that we've used comes from the theory around instrumental orchestration, and what Drivers and his colleagues defined for us are 6 orchestrations or types of orchestrations that occur during implementing ICTs in a classroom, and they are as follows. The one, the technical demo orchestration. These terms will also become clear when I do the conclusion to my presentation. Second one is explain the screen orchestration. The third one is discuss the screen orchestration. The fourth one is the link the screen and board orchestration. Fourth one, spot and show orchestration. In fact, that was the 5th one. And the 6th one, the Sherpa at work orchestrations. Now, it should sort of become clear to you that the word pedagogical move would actually fit these things better, because they are pedagogical moves that is being executed during lesson presentation in the classroom using technology. But it will also be made later in the conclusion, made clear to you. What we need to say is, if you look at the first 4, right, and remember we're talking about whole class orchestrations, the first 4 are basically teacher-centered. It's the teacher standing in front of the class doing those things, explaining and demonstrating, discussing the screen productions, and then maybe sometimes leave the screen and go to the board to delve deeper into the mathematical content. The last 2 is basically what learners would do, spot and show orchestration or Sherpa at work orchestration. These are orchestrations where learners are sitting in front of their own computer screens. Now, back to the episode at hand, this screen representation shows us what the teacher did. Now, from this, one can identify a number of instances that fits TPAC and a number of instances that fits the orchestration framework. I've circled some of these so that we can look at it more closely. Firstly, one needs to say when you use a piece of software, right, there are 2 things at play. First, the affordances of the software itself, but secondly, what you do with the software and how you adapt it to fit the task at hand. Now, what the software allows this teacher to do is to draw the graphs. However, the things that the teacher adds to the graph is what makes it possible to use the software in a teaching and learning situation. Now, let me quickly go to these circles, and the one that I'm pointing at there basically is a slider that allows the teacher to toggle between 3 sets of productions. Firstly, the teacher can only show the red line or the linear graph, y equals x plus 2, or the teacher can only show the parabola graph, y equals x squared minus 4, or the teacher, as in this case, can show the combination of the two. So there are 3 possible productions that the teacher can work with. Secondly, where the teacher's content knowledge is very crucial is in marking certain critical points. Well, the obvious ones are where the graphs intersect. The x-axis, normally referred to as the roots of the equation or the roots of the function. The linear function obviously has only 1, but the parabola has 2. And in fact, there is one that is common to both functions. Then there are other critical points, which I'm going to point out to you, and that is where the 2 graphs intersect. Right? Those are also very critical in terms of the problems the teacher is attempting to explain and for the learners to solve, which is solving simultaneous equations or looking at inequalities, either one graph at a time or the combination of the 2 graphs. The pedagogical content knowledge resides in the fact that the learner draw this broken line here and put those 2 points there, color the one blue and the other one red. Now those points are dynamic points which can be moved by the slider that the teacher constructed here. So those are important points, and to highlight their importance, the teacher also constructed dynamic text on this far right corner of the screen so that learners may be able to see what those points signifies. For instance, if you look at the point here, it signifies a position of the graph where the value of the graph is negative. And so for the value of x equals negative 3.2, the value of the graph is negative. Now, based on the data that I've presented to you here, we can now attempt to answer our research question. And the answer is contained in this table, where we have in this column what instrumental orchestration implies, and on this column the components of the TPAC framework. Now, what we have here relates mostly to what these terms mean, but they are very important and crucial because they also describe what the teacher would do in the classroom and where the TPAC knowledge components are made visible. For instance, if we look at a technical demo orchestration, it means explaining how the screen production has been produced. In other words, how the software has been adapted, right? We call that process instrumentalization in the theory. Now, which means it shows the teacher's technical knowledge, or it requires a certain measure of technical knowledge on the part of the teacher. Now, the teacher then needs to explain what the learners would see as a screen output, what mathematics is represented there, which coincides with the explain the screen instrumentation, but also it's a measure in which the teacher, in this instance, shows knowledge of the content at hand. Okay, link the screen board is delving deeper into the content by using an alternative representation. Now, in this instance, the alternative representation was for the teacher to move over to the board, the writing board, and show the learners how, instead of using the graphs, they can use a table method to solve the inequality between or formed by combining the quadratic function and the linear function, which is significant and is a manifestation of the teacher's PCK, pedagogical content knowledge, in terms of offering the learners alternative methods of solving a quadratic inequality. Then the whole class discussion, I think, speaks for itself. It is where the teacher involves the whole class in a discussion, which requires the teacher to exhibit pedagogical knowledge. Now, the last two rows obviously doesn't apply to the episode I'm describing. However, it is still important to take note of, because it refers to instances where the students are working on their own computer terminals, which requires the teacher in the design of activities to have a measure of content knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and technical knowledge. And then, before I end, let me make the following observation. I think it's critical to also acknowledge that teachers need training and support. And therefore, critical factors for ICT adoption and integration in regular teaching and learning practices are one, high quality teacher training programs, both in service and pre-service, and this should be for extended periods. Two, exposure to new technologies for teaching and learning, and I'm suggesting it should happen both inset and preset, and then teachers collaborating and sharing technology-driven resources, either through professional learning communities, communities of practices, or attending teacher in-service sessions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith, for that very interesting presentation. I think it's very much relevant at the moment, especially after the last few years where we've had more online teaching and there has been a rise in the use of technology in education. So an excellent example of how important the training and reflections from teachers on the ground are to actually show that software is not just something you do, but how the pedagogical practices, as you demonstrated, are deeply embedded in the use of software in the classroom. I see there's a comment from Prof. Marmon about how we need to advocate this tool to be used in to the DBE. I was wondering if you had any comments in response to Prof. Marmon's reflection there.
Well, let me start by saying I think there's a huge drive from the side of the DBE and from the side of especially provincial education departments to mobilize ICTs for teaching and learning. The one thing that I think is important, firstly, is to create conducive or facilitating conditions. And thereby I would refer to making available the hardware. The software, especially GeoGebra, is free software. Teachers can download that for themselves, but teachers cannot by themselves master especially the technical intricacies of the program. There is where the training, the support, and the collaboration is important. I'm aware that, for instance, at Nelson Mandela University, they have a GeoGebra center, which is linked to similar centers globally. I'm not aware of anything of that sort in the Western Cape. I think that would go a long way in promoting the use thereof and helping teachers to design. Currently, my take on it is that we have to get these master teachers such as the one that I'm sharing about to demonstrate to colleagues, but mostly also to create little applets that are ready-made and customized for classroom use, where the teacher can simply switch on the computer and as it were, ride the bicycle or drive the car.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. I think, so can you just stop sharing your screen quickly?
Okay.
Great. I think you highlight the very important complications of software is fantastic, but it's the hardware that needs to go with it as well. It's the technical training and skills and the ongoing support for teachers. So thank you so much for sharing. Just wondering if there are any other questions, just checking in the Q&A. I don't see any other questions at this stage. Right, if there are any additional questions, we can get to those at the end. I think let's move on to our next speaker, or group of speakers. Our next presenter is Zainoenisa Allie, who is from Science Education in the School of Science and Mathematics Education at the Faculty of Education. One of her research interests is the identification of alternative misconceptions of science education students and teachers on challenging science topics and instructional tools to address them. Zainoenisa's research interests also include the role of alternative conceptions play in the conceptual understanding of science topics. Furthermore, she uses her classroom as a space where she can show hopefully future teachers the effective use of technology in education. Ms. Allie, over to you and your students.
Hi, thank you, Janine. I'll just share my screen while I'm that. And firstly, just say thank you for the DVC and Professor Marman for giving me this opportunity. And as Janine said, yes, I will be presenting as a group. So it's a show and tell, where I'll be presenting with my fourth year students in maths and science education. So as you said before, I'm Zainoenisa Allie, and my topic of the day is basically trying to show you the importance of teachers as researchers, and that's also with addressing the SDG 4, which is basically the Sustainable Development Goal of the UNESCO. And the most important part of this is obviously the feedback from my students, which I'll introduce later. That's Yamkela, Masizana, Nabewieyah van der Voort, and Jianni Williams. Okay, so let us first start. The SDG 4 is essentially based on education, and their primary focus is to ensure quality education for all. So that's the primary aim that they have. And of course, the means how to get that is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education, and also to promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. And since we all are here in terms of education, most of us at least, even if you are on science faculty or a teacher, I was at the opening of a conference this morning and a particular lecturer said he's not a teacher. I tend to disagree. They always think the education faculties are the teachers. All of us are teachers, irrespective of what faculty you are. So the SDG 4 essentially fits into all of the faculties at any university and school, any educational facility. So these words are quite familiar for all of us: quality education and lifelong learners. That's also part of the graduate attributes that UWC wants our students to leave with, that they need to be those lifelong learners. So essentially the SDG 4, as any others as well, they have targets. So the SDG 4 has 10 targets. So by 2030, they want to reach all of these targets. So of these 10 targets, which obviously have different aspects of education, there are 7 targets, which are your expected outcomes. And then, now those are those 7 targets, which I won't be focusing on today. And then the other 3 targets, which are the means of achieving the SDG 4. So what will we do in order to achieve those 7 targets? And those are the 3. So of the 3, I'll be only covering 2. I'm glad actually that Dr. Charles has introduced the idea of the TPAC and technology. And the other one, the SDG 4A, which I won't be covering, is essentially the effective learning environments. That is, of course, how to build and upgrade our education facilities that will actually promote the idea of quality education. So the idea about the GeoGebra and the equip your education facilities with all of these computers, that is part of the 4A, which I won't be doing. So obviously we'll be doing first, I'm doing this SDG 4C. That's part of how to get to the targets, one of the aims. And that essentially is telling you about what is the purpose. So that is now for you guys to see is by 2030, this is now a direct quote from UNESCO. So what they want is to increase the supply of qualified teachers. And one part of that is also through internationalization, meaning international cooperation in terms of teacher training and specifically in developing countries. Now, the teacher as a researcher, for me, it fits into that idea about the qualified teachers. Because quality doesn't necessarily start once you leave university. Quality starts during your whole process of becoming that teacher. So, and every time when they mention quality education for the SDG 4 specifically, it infers the necessity of qualified teachers to deliver that quality. So how do we, so the conversation about research, we cannot exclude our teachers. So the importance of that, so your teachers are fundamental for quality education, and that speaks directly to our SDG 4 as an overarching goal. So what now, unfortunately, we all know in many schools, especially in low-income countries and developing countries like South Africa, the quality of education can be improved. I'm not saying it's low. I don't like saying that. It doesn't matter. There's always room for improvement. And a couple of articles that actually says a lack of qualified teachers. So essentially what they're saying, we as the providers for the school system should actually look at that, and not just a teacher, I'm talking now faculties also in general. And what they essentially say is in order to get that quality education, to get that qualified teachers, teachers as a whole, they must be empowered, they must be motivated, professionally qualified is a given. And for me, what's important is it must be supported within that well-resourced, effectively governed systems. And that is where we as a university play a role. We need to fit all of those criteria when our teachers, when our students leave and go into the teaching profession. And of course, what will happen and this is the SDG 4C, and they essentially is to increase the supply of qualified teachers in developing countries. And more specifically, the niche area, people, is also the scarce skills. It's a maths and science teachers. That is specifically what is also focused on. So what can we do as university, starting from our department, going to our faculty, going to our institute as a whole? So of course, people is creating new possibilities for research design. And the idea of a new research design is essentially, I will get to later, where I will give you the question of how we can actually get to that new possibilities for a research design within our undergraduate as well as our postgraduate and our communities. Now communities, I'm talking also about professional communities here. So with that, we need to build that collaborative, open learning spaces. So open learning spaces is not just academia. Academia also in community academia outside in the school environment. And that is, of course, people, we need to prepare our teachers, as we said, to be lifelong learners. That's the next point I will be bringing about. So education providers, that's our schools, our colleges, our universities. So those are the places where we had to create those possibilities and being collaborative. And that is, of course, people to support academics, our stakeholders, and our education providers. And as you said before, prepare that teacher, and I'm not saying teacher, I'm talking about in-service as well as pre-service, to be that lifelong learner. And this, of course, people to be that lifelong learner, they need to develop the capacity to continually evolve to meet the needs of the changing classroom and the world. And this, of course, also fits into the graduate attributes. We need to prepare our students for the world of work. And as we all can see, COVID has shown us, our world of work, our world of being changed in an instant. So we need to prepare our students and ourselves for that particular dynamics around that. So how do we create that environment? So there's an overlap, obviously, people. There's a lot of overlaps between the requirement of good research and good practice. And as we all know, most universities, if not all, they are on the basis and the premise of we are a research-led university, Yes, they do have the community of practice out there, the community outreaches, and they also have the teaching and learning. But essentially, they are known as a research-led university. So we need to obviously provide both the foundation and the rationale for a development of teachers as researchers. Because essentially, I believe that, and not just me, a lot of research since the 1960s already has promoted the idea of involving teachers as researchers. But the further part is now not necessarily just in-service teachers. It started a bit earlier. So that foundation and rationale is a very important aspect for we as universities that we must look at. And we also need to create that teacher culture in which, as a research-based discussion, I do know we do promote that already, and debate. And that is, of course, it becomes an integral, a very important part of teacher training and professionalism. And when I say teacher training, we all know about that is now your undergraduate, as well as we all have said now, like Dr. Nel and Dr. Charles said, the in-service training. So it's in-service, but also the focus should be more a little bit on the pre-service. That is our undergraduate students. And in case you're still thinking, I'm still talking about education students, yes, I do talk about that, but most of our PGCE students come from the other faculties outside of education, where they go into the education stream as a profession. So let's just quickly see. So essentially what the next one now is obviously the how do we achieve that goal is the SDG 4. So what they essentially say is that to expand globally the number of scholarships. And they, of course, have targets there, specifically technical engineering and scientific programs. And all, of course, this is no more in terms of where the developed countries will be a supportive role. But what I like about is the idea about the support in terms of scholarship. So this is also where we as university can play a role. And that is, of course, to provide funding opportunities for the continuation of education. It's not just you have a degree, you can become the teacher, you can become the doctor while still teaching, you become the professor while still teaching. So obviously that in continuation shouldn't just stop at your degree or your honors. So, and this is also part of the SDG, is the focus is on young individuals. And how do we then do that? Is obviously we need to strengthen the higher education institutes and the workforce development programs within specifically also the undergraduate programs. And the reason why I'm saying this is we want to promote that idea of the relevance of world of work, and it must start undergrad, and it must be a research-informed teaching as well as a teaching-informed research. So those two is it's like a palindrome, you left to right and right to left. So it's a research-informed teaching as well as a teaching-informed research. So how did the SDG fit into this? So I've applied for international conference it was stationed here in Cape Town, and I got accepted. And of course, DBC, our education faculty, our Deputy Dean, Professor Marman, supplied the funding for that. But besides that, I also encouraged my undergraduate, my fourth years to apply. And 16 of my students applied for that. And of the 16, 6 applied also for funding from the conference itself. And the other 10, so 6 of the 16 got funding from the conference people. And the other 10 were also sponsored by Professor Marman. So they had a very important aspect. So this was international, the IUPAC International Conference of Chemistry Education. Now this particular, there were 26 already of that before. This particular is focused on teachers. No, not teachers, specifically focused on tertiary education, meaning your lecturers on the university, not teachers. So this year it was the first time ever that they actually included a teacher day within the conference. And this is where my students has now applied. 16 of them attended this particular conference with, of course, the funding from our faculty. So again, as I said before, these are our 16 students, and the collaborative purpose there is also with Dr. Renee Turin. She's a physical sciences teacher, teaching at a high school. and did also a doctorate, still busy with postgrad studies, and she's still involved, and she was part of the LOC, the local organizing committee of the conference, and she also provided this particular opportunity for our students. So it's a collaborative nature between the school base as well as university base, and specifically in undergrad. And the students that will be speaking today is Jianni Williams, as you can see there, Yamkela Masizana, and Nabewieyah. So the first that will be speaking now will be our Yamkela, you'll go first, and then Nabewieyah. So let's hear from our students what was their experiences during the conference. So Yamkela, you can start now. I'll stop sharing for now. Okay, Yamkela, you can speak now.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Yamkela.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I am Yamkela Masizana, a fourth-year student in B.Ed in Mathematics and Natural Sciences. So today I'll be speaking about my experience in attending the ICCE Science Teachers Conference that happened in Cape Town, 2022, which was this year. So before this time, I knew about teachers' conferences, but I didn't know exactly what they entailed. But after this attendance, I can say that it was very important, as I believe that it exposed student teachers to the whole dimension of the education faculty, rather than the traditional classroom and school environment. And also the attendance of the students and teachers for the very first time, I believe, was a good example of collaborative work, as it explored the experiences and the knowledge of the whole education faculty, from its undergraduates to the people in the higher positions, and also the experiences of the international guests that we have. And also this tool is very important in maintaining the strong community of science teachers that should be able to support each other. And this was a point that was explored in one of the presentations that was given. And another presentation that stood out to me was in reference to the South African diverse context, which explored the importance of indigenous languages in the teaching of sciences. So as much as we get to learn about this in our curriculum and also from our lecturers, I believe it was very insightful to hear it from a teacher who was from KZN, I believe in the townships or the rural areas, and they were able to give us their perspective from a situation that they dealt with hand in hand, and was able to observe and also present physical results that were represented in a form of a graph from his own experience. And in closing, I would say the attendance of such events, I believe they enable student teachers with extended knowledge and extended skills, in turn creating pre-service teachers that are more informed and will be easily employable in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Yamkela. Nabewieyah, you can speak now.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Again, as Yamkela said, this was the first time that we attended a conference, and it was a big one at that. It was extremely intimidating to be around people who have this wealth of knowledge where you come in as an undergraduate student. However, when I interacted with them, when we had to mingle with these people, I was pleasantly surprised and very, very enlightened. When we do research, when we do assignment, it is so easy to go online and go and look up an article or case study and read about these people's work. But the opportunity that we were given, we were able to interact with people with the researchers on a people level. Yeah, another aspect that I want to go into is the networking opportunities that we were given. So we sat around the table where I was at the table where the teacher had, I think, about like 20 to 25 years of experience. And when we spoke to him, he sent us a whole list. He gave us access to his Google Drive. We had a list of resources that he uses in his class, and he gave it to us just like that. So I think that the experience allowed us to have an opportunity to be able to network as novice teachers. We don't go into the field as experts. There is definitely, I know there's going to come a time where I'm not going to know what to do. So that opportunities where we get to speak to those people, where I know I can email this man because I met him at the conference and ask him, look, I need some guidance on this, or how do you think I should handle this situation? I think that's extremely important, so that you don't go into the world of work on an island where you feel like there is nobody that can help you. So I definitely think that being able to go to conferences or attending webinars, because we attended a webinar as well, the WC webinar for science education, that was so it's just so nice to know that you're not going in blindly into the world of work blindly. Also, just in closing, the experience that we were given facilitated development for me within the scientific field, and more specifically science education. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nabewieyah. And yes, they were very, very nervous on this platform, but they attended already that conference. So hopefully this will be your first part of research, Nabewieyah and Yamkela. Just Jianni has sent her apologies because of some load shedding. But the one thing I do know about Jianni, because we had discussions at the conference, she met up with her old teacher, two of her old teachers, and now they're on a level where they can discuss the exact same thing. So she met up with her old teachers and a principal. So that connection was also nice to see in terms of your student now becomes your colleague. And as I said before, so for me, in terms of connecting the SDGs, so I've mentioned the SDG 4, which essentially is quality education and lifelong learners. And we also mentioned the idea about the SDG 4B. These are now the goals. And if we connect all of this within our departments, within our faculties, and that of course goes out to the other faculties within our institute, and that we can then create, and of course hopefully the square will get bigger. But in order for us to create that collaborative process, it's important so that teachers as researchers, and that all can connect then us with the community, professional and otherwise, there will also be the idea about the researchers as teachers. So this connectivity is one thing that hopefully we will establish at UWC. So that is all for me today, and hopefully I've connected that. But before I want to leave you and say thank you, there is two questions that I want you to think about. So for me, in terms of the thinking of the SDGs and how do we fit in that whole idea, it essentially is, do our undergraduate curricula actually speak to a research-led university like UWC? And what is the role of our undergraduate students within research? So essentially what we want, what I'm trying in my own capacity, and hopefully we'll go out a bit further, is to create that environment of research, to plant that seed of research. And I do know Professor Jose has mentioned the idea about the postgraduate academy, where they will help the support and the transition in postgraduate students. So I want to extend that lovely initiative, trickle into our undergraduate programs, and not just your fourth year. This should be, you don't become a researcher just like that. And we've been through that. You've never done thinking about research. I'm talking about proposal writing in undergrad, and suddenly you're on it, and suddenly your master's and your PhD, but you've never actually been inducted in a enclosed environment, in a very safe environment during your undergrad to become that researcher. So hopefully our curricula will change and our research initiatives will change, and including our undergraduate students. thank you all, and that's it for me and my students. And I have to thank my students again for sharing their experiences, although they were very nervous.
Great, thank you so much, Ms. Allie. You can stop sharing your screen. But please do stay with your video on. Thank you so much for sharing. And I really loved what you said there about it being teachers as researchers, but also researchers as teachers. And I think that's so important in our higher education context to make sure that we are, as staff, also invested in the development of our students in whatever form of teaching they're going into. Like you said, lifelong learning is a crucial part of what we hope to develop in all our students. So thank you for sharing this wonderful example of developing your students as teachers by giving them opportunities to go to international conferences, and to all your students for sharing what seems like it was an incredible opportunity to now get this global perspective and global networking and opportunities for their own development.
Thank you.
I would like to open the opportunity for any questions. I don't see anything in the Q&A at the moment.
A hand is raised, Janine.
Okay,
Professor Kazuayo.
Okay. If they would like to ask a question, they're welcome to. I'm not sure if participants are able to ask verbally. I think they need to type into the chat.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Oh, yes, thank you. I think it's more of a comment than actually a question. I think I would like to refer back to the question that Ms. Allie posed, particularly regarding the role of our undergrad students in research. And I want to comment here for actually starting this and actually involving our students, undergrad students, not only as, say, participants in whatever research projects that we are undertaking, but as equal partners actually in research. To me, that was really one of the most powerful things, because whenever we think about research projects that we want to undertake, we think of who is going to participate in this research, and then maybe we go down to students. But in this case in particular, Ms. Allie actually went further to show us, to actually educate us about the fact that students can actually be, even at undergraduate level, can actually become equal partners in whatever research that we undertake or we think of undertaking. So for me, it was really a matter of saying, thank you very much. And I really commend you for the good work that you are doing on behalf of the School of Science and Mathematics Education in the Faculty of Education. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Becky. He's our HOD, our director of the SME. And I don't know if it's a bias there, but but it's also because of I can apply, but it's also the HODs, our directors, and our deputy deans that will actually afford us the support with regards to finances and all of that, not just financial, for me and my students. So yes, we can apply, but we still need the supportive role of our HODs and our deputy deans within research.
Absolutely, and I think that brings back to the whole idea of support across the system. There's another question in the chat. This is not a question, but a comment on what Zaino shared, that we should really consider being eased into research from first year. It's very hard work to suddenly be expected to take part in honors.
I went through it.
Yes, very much so. So I think that's something we're all aware of, and there are lots of support systems available. Like we mentioned, the Postgrad Academy and DPGS. As you're saying, at undergrad, we need to be looking at how we can help support our students in terms of research. Just exposing them to research is an important part of that as well.
Thank you.
No other questions at this time. Thank you so much, Ms. Allie, and your students for presenting. We'll now move up to our last speaker of the day, Mr. Frederic Sylvester. Frederic Tony Sylvester is a lecturer in the Faculty of Education in the Department of Educational Psychology at the University of the Western Cape. He is a registered educational psychologist with the Health Professions Council of South Africa. He has published in the areas of boys growing up with absent fathers, school support, gender identity, and life skills. Latest contribution was a book chapter on barriers to learning, gender identity, and gender expression in South African schools. He has also presented papers at national and international conferences, and in January 2019 was the keynote speaker at the Diversity Conference in Bangalore, India. He is a passionate campaigner for children's rights and inclusion. His outreach and community involvement activities nationally and internationally have given him opportunities to travel to many different countries as presenter, participant, and activist. Mr. Sylvester, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, even though I've rushed out of a 3-day workshop where I've been busy since 7:30 this morning, but I am a fighter and I'll carry on. I'm going to start my presentation. First of all, my passion for children takes me into a grade art classroom every Wednesday. And sitting there and observing what's going on in those classrooms sometimes irked me so much that I just wanted to scream and run out. But unfortunately, as a researcher, you just have to go with the flow. So if I look at my introduction, it says grade art teachers' perceptions and implementation of free play within the curriculum and assessment policy statement in selected schools in the Western Cape. And if you look at my introduction, I start with, that's my introduction. I'll cover a little bit of the introduction, the purpose of the study, research questions, theoretical framework, methodology. I'll just skim through that and then I'll concentrate more on the findings and some recommendations. Now, the state of early childhood development, I started out by first looking at the UNICEF reports on the state of the world's children. And UNICEF alludes to what we're also looking at, that too many children drop out of school before they reach grade 8 or grade 10. And the same thing happens in South Africa, and the consequences of what they're writing about, we see playing out in South Africa and the world over. It also affects our economies. And if you look at the high unemployment rate within South African context, and yesterday I had 2 young boys in a school who said they don't want to learn. So where does it come from? So for me, that was the start of wanting, I must do something to bring about a change in this. If we look at the grade art pedagogy, which should be fun, it should be engaging, it should be a lot of integration of music, art, drama. There should be letting go. The teacher cannot let go because they're so stiff, holding on to whatever they have. So they cannot be that clown that the little ones need to laugh and enjoy and have fun. Then if we look at the status of the grade art teacher training, if you look at Finland, where getting into a teacher training is far more difficult than getting into medicine. And here we train our grade art teachers after matric, a 2-year certificate in grade art teaching people. For me, that is so sad. That the most important phase of a child's developmental life and part of their cognitive development, we put down to the lowest trained teachers in our hierarchy of teaching. Then we look at the curriculum and assessment policy statement, which teachers do not understand fully. It is also taking away the creativity of the teachers. It is very time constrained. And the other thing is, there is mention of this concept free play, which I researched, in the document, but all they state in this very important curriculum, which teachers should use to enhance their teaching in the foundation phase, especially in grade R, there's no definition, there's no explanation, there's no theoretical background. All you have is a list of things you can do and a list of requirements that each school must have. So based on that, I felt that this cannot be, and also my experience from seeing those teachers in action, I decided to do this research on looking at free play within the foundation phase or the grade R classroom. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is basically the purpose of the study. It's just to gather relevant information on how grade R teachers in selected schools in the Western Cape implement and perceive free play from a CAPS perspective, then looking at the context of the study, describing grade R teachers' understanding of free play, explore their perceptions, and then at the same time investigating how free play activities are organized to facilitate the acquisition of life skills within the CAPS document. Thank you. Now, if you look at my research questions, it's again straightforward. I'm not going to spend much time on it. Just basically the main question is how do they understand and implement, and then just the basic sub-questions to feed into getting my data. So I can go to the next slide. I don't want to waste more time with that. Now, my theoretical framework, I used the biological systems theory of Bruns and Brenner. Why? Because if we look at that individual child, especially in the foundation phase, that child is at the center of so many systems. Because within the foundation phase, the grade R, the family plays such a crucial role. There's got to be continuous interaction with the parents. When the kids are let out of the gate, the teacher needs to engage from that point out. The little communication books. Then it goes into the community. The teacher needs to understand that child's context. Because if the teacher understands the child's context, the teacher is more able to engage with the child on all levels. And also inculcate within the unfolding of their curricula the content or the context that they find, and also in that way assist the child in a sort of psychological way to cope with those incidences that comes from the context. The theory of intentionality states that the teacher must be purposeful. The teacher must be able to plan. The teacher must be able to create a participatory environment. The teacher must be able to engage and also integrate, but also reflect at the end of that engagement with the learners so that they can try to improve or find out where the children are with barriers and how we can find interventions in which way to solve those children's needs. And the last one, we always go into environments or into research projects with that, I would say, with a deficit approach. I wanted to approach it more in a positive way. So looking at teachers' assets in creating that safe environment in their classroom, being a loving, caring, supportive, fun individual that can create that sense of belonging for these little darlings sitting in front. Then the methodology, I used a case study, multiple case study, where each individual school represented a case. My participants were 3 teachers from each of the 3 schools. So they were 9 teachers and the 3 school principals. I did a purposive sampling with, they had to be grade R teachers. They had to have some training. They had to have taught for 5 years. With the principals, they must offer grade R at their schools. They must have affinity for grade R, and they must be able to propose that as an important aspect of their teaching. The data collection, the first was a questionnaire just to get some biographical information from the teachers. Then I used semi-structured interviews. And the interesting thing here, people, again, the first 3 weeks, I sat in those classes every single day to build a relationship with the children and the teacher, so that when I start my actual information to gather for the research purpose, it was natural. They felt comfortable with it. I was not somebody sitting there that they had to worry about or think about. So that was an important concept for me, that I had to have a relationship with the learners and the teacher. I was not researching the learners, I was researching the teacher, but it was important that it came from both. Then observation, that was very, very, like I said earlier on, sometimes very frustrating, but I had to get home and knock my head against the wall many times and say, just go back and do what you're there for. Focus groups, sorry about that. Focus groups came after that, where I sat with the 9 teachers and the 3 principals just to straighten things out. Then we had document analysis. I went through all the policy documents, of course, the CAPS documents thoroughly, and then my field notes. And the data was analyzed by thematic analysis. Now, findings. The first thing was for me the theory and practice. It was extremely easy for teachers to talk about free play. They must have read somewhere so they could give me a sort of definition of it. But when it came to the practice, people, everything fell flat. To them, free play was for the children to go and run around on the playground outside, and them sitting on their cell phones or talking amongst each other. But there was nothing constructive or structured that spoke to free play. Also within the classrooms, they have a theme. They were not able to place that theme within a free play environment where the child could choose what they wanted. All they had to do was be there as facilitators to guide the child. So you speak about, from a Froebelian perspective, and Tina Bruce, one of the proponents of the free play, a modern day one, she speaks about freedom with guidance. You allow them that freedom, but you observe, and then you find time to intervene, to facilitate and scaffold that child's learning processes. That was not there. So for me, it was interesting to hear that they could speak about it, but when I sat there observing, that really was something that was very disturbing. Curriculum and policy, like I said earlier on, it's stated, but there's no clarification. So where can the teachers find things? There's nobody that comes and shows them how to do it. That I'll allude to later on. But the CAPS document really needs to be readdressed. And also from a CAPS perspective, when I look at free play, why don't we change it, like Tina Bruce would say, to free flow play? Because it's free flowing. The child was able to do it, go to it themselves, choose their own activities, and they're the teacher. So it's not free play as such, with this whole misconception of what it is. I would prefer, like I would say, free play versus free flow play, because the child needs to move freely. You know, it's all about this whole discovery learning and things like that. With the document, also the deficits in the policy documents, also you have strict times. So teachers are rushing to stick to the CAPS document, which says you have to cover this in this amount of time. So what the poor kids are doing, they are exposed to blocks and to all kinds of activities as prescribed in the CAPS document, but suddenly it comes to a stop, an abrupt end. So the child who wants to linger longer, because I've not achieved, I've not mastered the activity, is being robbed of being allowed to take that further and to expand their knowledge by themselves. Because children will only stop once they've mastered something, and we do not allow them that mastery from what I've experienced. So that is also a big question mark for me. What do we need to do? The deficits and limitations, like I said earlier on, there was a lot of teacher training, empowerment, capacitating, all of those things. The other sad thing, what I observed in these classes was where the teacher robbed this poor child of their spontaneity and their enthusiasm. And for me, that is a crime. I would imprison somebody if they do something like that to my child. So the children have to sit in little desks, like little tin soldiers, don't talk, very punitive, very policing style, always shouting and screaming. And then also the child becomes so anxiety bound. And this is what I find sometimes is that blockage that we then experience. The child's not able to read, the child's not able to write because of that anxiety. And that anxiety is actually creating that barrier because of how they are being treated from that young age of being grade arts learners. If we look at the limitations, like I said, this whole thing about teachers not holding the kids back, not giving them opportunity to just be themselves, choosing their own game or instruments they want to play with, teacher being there, walking around, intervening, scaffolding, facilitating their learning, not what she wants to be. What was killing was the teacher would give them a piece of paper with a tree already, and they had to color that. Instead of giving them the paper and say, draw something. And then if she does that, then she says, but it can't be that. Again, robbing that poor child of being creative, abusing their fantasy, which was a problem for me as well. Then the in-service training. Teachers complained that very often it was forced upon them. The other thing was that many of the facilitators had a 2-day workshop on what they're supposed to do in the training. They were rushed. It was too theoretical. And the other aspect was they spoke about practical activities, but none of these things were done in the actual workshop. So they never experienced what it is to do a free play activity where the learners can choose. Again, coming back our theory of intentional teaching, where the teachers got to create the environment in which the child selects and engages with until they feel satisfied and have mastered that, which is not happening. So we really have to look at in-service training. And from that in-service training perspective, I've already developed a course for honors in free play pedagogy, which we can implement, which I have to put through SDA if it's allowed to speak to my. I also designed workshops for teachers in training, which I hope I'll be allowed to show them the practicalities of how to, what to. And the wonderful thing is that as from next year, grade R will be part of the school system. Right now, it was still on its own, but next year it will be part of the school system. So there'll be a great need to go and expose teachers to this whole philosophy and theory of free play or free flow play as it should be done in schools. The biggest thing for me was the resources. The classrooms are too small to have all the stations that a foundation phase class calls for. There's got to be a fantasy corner, but it's so poorly resourced. Broken toys, things that's just dumped there. The reading corner, very poorly resourced. Books that's pages torn out. I mean, please, people, we've got to create something that our children can be stimulated and motivated to want to do something. So the very small classrooms. Again, time. Because teachers are so concerned about finishing what the CAPS document prescribes, they just give up. So they rush through things and the children cannot get a hold on what they're doing, what they're learning. So the ones who are not able to keep up with the teacher, they fall behind. And the other sad thing is the CAPS or the new curriculum does not allow the teacher time to take those little kids aside. Some teachers do, but they give up their own time. And some schools are fortunate to have that little mommy that comes in to take the kids into the library where they can help them with their reading. That was a big problem for me, trying to compete with the CAPS document to get everything done because the department's checking up on it. The other thing was the resources. People, the sad thing for me that was not happening in the classroom. So your activities in the classroom must reflect in the activities outside. So when you plan your intervention for whichever theme for that week, your activities inside must be taken outside, and this is what the teachers can't do. And also the outside environment is so lacking of facilities, of equipment, whatever. It's just a grass patch very often, the traditional slide and jungle gym and a swing. But that is basically what they have. And for me, that was very, very restraining. Okay, can we carry on? I know I'm going over time nearly.
Yes, sorry,
Okay.
just a quick reminder of time.
Okay, so for me, the recommendations was to teacher training and development, more practical application, free play and play modules offered at teacher training institutions, curriculum restructuring and design, improvement of outdoor activities. And then I spoke to that already. So that concludes my presentation. I think it was more of a narrative. And also thank you again for all your ears. And I hope I did justice to what you wanted to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sylvester, for your passionate sharing. You're obviously incredibly passionate about your topic and your field here, especially with how foundational grade R is for our learners' education, like you said, to make sure that they develop that love for learning from the very early on. So thank you so much for sharing. I see we've got a question from Prof. Marman and then a comment in the chat. So Prof. Marman, we'll hand over to your question first.
Thank you, Janine, and thank you, Mr. Sylvester. So it's rather a comment or a request. I think what we've tried in our faculty was to, over the last 5 years or so, is to really partner up with the Department of Basic Education and Department of Higher Education and Training. We realized some time ago that our research should land somewhere. Our research should be structured and marshaled towards social impact. And hence the examples that you've seen the colleagues have shared this afternoon are exactly those. I just want Mr. Sylvester just to share maybe in 2 or 3 lines very quickly his idea that originated some time ago about the campus kits on UWC campus, the campus kits site, and what are the current plans in terms of that, because they are working towards a knowledge laboratory, if you want to use that word, where we want to build it in a hands-on, practical, as I understand it, center of excellence in terms of foundation phase training of teachers. So Mr. Sylvester, if you can just summarize quickly so that the audience can just understand about the plans in that regard on campus. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Marman. And I'm passionate about that. I hope I'm not going to be blocked. My idea was we've got this wonderful campus kids on our campus here, and I would like to turn that into a multi-purpose center, where we're going to service it as we still have the kids there, but our community and health sciences education, we can all service those kids by giving them the important things like physio, occupational, and all of that. So that will be where every department, even the family studies, the social work, every department can have something in there where our students can build their capacity, get practical training, but also to open it up to community-based early childhood centers, where we've got to train them with these skills that I'm speaking about now. We've got a wonderful opportunity to join forces with the Froebel Society of England. We've already have a small cohort of colleagues working with them. They want to come and train our teachers specifically within a Froebel perspective, which speaks about all these things that I alluded to in my research. So I would like, and then we want to reach out to the community where parents can come for guidance. I mean, I work in the community around here all the time, and yesterday I had issues that I have to go back next week because I couldn't deal with it on my own. But that is where we're giving our students that community outreach. It can also be a research hub. So all the academic areas that we need to cover, research, community outreach, teaching and learning, development, all of those things will be in one center. And this is my dream. I'm busy. There is an MOU in place. All I'm doing now is doing the addenda of what else I would like. And this will then be presented to our Dean and Prof. Joseph. And we've already had discussions. So I just hope that something comes off, because this is really something that will give all our students the opportunities. Funding, I've already alluded to. So building that room where they can do physical education, art, music, drama, which is so dear to my heart, which they're not getting. That is my dream, so that our students can get what they're not getting presently, but within the confines of UWC. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, a very exciting initiative. I think it's an excellent example of exactly what we'll be speaking about over Research Week in terms of collaboration, cross-disciplinary collaboration, and making sure that our research is actually impacting the communities that we're in. Just a comment in the Q&A. Someone saying that their daughter spent 6 months this year in a South African grade R and then a few months in a German kindergarten. She hated the free play concept of German Kita and is looking forward to coming back to a structured environment in Cambridge where they learn numbers and letters. She literally runs to Cambridge with a big smile every day. In Germany, they don't offer anything like grade R education here. So I think that's maybe just an interesting example that there's differences.
Yeah,
based on the child.
I also worked in Germany and I speak German, and I understand that it's not for everybody. And I think this is why our parents must also open themselves up, and our teachers, they are so into themselves. They cannot be that clown, that person engaging so that the learners can look at them and hang from them. And this is what I'm saying. We need to give our learners that opportunities to be free, to let go of what they're holding down. And I understand it's not for everybody, but I think this is what we have to allude to, and it's also what the CAPS curriculum has asked us. Great. Thanks, Mommy, for that.
Thanks, Mr. Sylvester. I think that's all from the questions there. So thank you so much for sharing.
Okay, back to my workshops. Bye.
Bye. All right, so then maybe just to sum up the session, we're at the end of session 2 of day 3 of our research week. And as you would have known, today's session was focused on the Faculty of Education. That very much speaks to SDG 4, quality education and lifelong learners. And as we've seen throughout the presentations, this comes across firstly in making sure we have enough qualified teachers who are empowered, motivated, and supported to they themselves being lifelong learners, as well as promoting lifelong learning in the students that they're developing, whether that's good foundations for learning at grade R level or in our undergrad students, even just in terms of developing their love for research as well. And I think we've also seen the importance of using technology, both in the teaching space and in practice, but then the importance of the need for support and training, all the hardware and software across all the different levels of teaching that's involved. It's also a wonderful reminder that we're all teachers, whether you're in basic education or higher education, there's all an element of teaching. I think that really important duality of being teachers as researchers and researchers and teachers, to making sure that our evidence-based practice is actually going forward, and how we're engaging with the community and making sure that the research that we're doing is having impact and counting in all we're doing. And I think, again, something that stood out for me is that importance of partnerships across the systems, basic education and higher education, collaboration with the community, and collaboration across faculties, and making sure that all we're doing in terms of education is having the most impact that it can. So thank you all so much to all the speakers and to all the viewers who attended today. Thank you so much for your participation and engagement. Tomorrow is day 4 of Research Week, where the first session will be the Faculty of Dentistry starting at 9 a.m. And then the second session will be the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences starting at 1 p.m. So thank you all so much for attending today. Thank you to all the organizers and to Prof. France for organizing this incredible event to share our research and learning and helping connecting possibilities and making research and innovation count at UWC. Thank you all so much for your time, and have a good rest of the day.